Hey, this is Joe from the Livingston Public Library's Adult Services and Acquisitions Department, coming to you from our local history room. Now, if you know me, you know I love music, and one thing I especially love about music is listening to the songs and albums that came out during certain 1 to 2 year periods to try and get a feel for what the vibe was in the air at those times, what the zeitgeist was, if you will. And in doing this for so long, I've come to the conclusion that listening to the music that was recorded or released within a certain time is probably the best way to put your finger on the pulse of the past, far better than mere journalism or literature or cinema, in my opinion. It seems that the musical recordings made around the same points in history, even when they're in vastly different genres or from different parts of the world, they often seem to have similar attitudes and similar energy, the same blood type flowing through their veins. And that's why I've been super into this book that came out not too long ago. It's called 1973 Rock at the Crossroads by Andrew Grant Jackson, which examines the music of that year, mostly rock, yes, but also a number of other kindred genres. And here's just a small fraction of the classic and historic music from that era. We have Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, one of the most famous and best-selling albums in the history of recorded music, which entered the Billboard Top 200 Albums chart in 1973 and ended up sticking around for 937 consecutive weeks. Led Zeppelin's Houses of the Holy, which is, if not exactly their most perfect album, that honor probably goes to its predecessor, the technically untitled album known as Zoso or Led Zeppelin 4. Houses of the Holy, though, is arguably their most interesting album, and probably my favorite of theirs. Also, Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, Stevie Wonder's Inner Visions, Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On, The World is a Ghetto by War, Alice Cooper's Billion Dollar Babies, Billy Joel's Piano Man, and Joni Mitchell's Chord and Spark, her best album, for my money, released in 1974 but recorded in 1973. The film The Harder They Come is released in the US in 1973, and its soundtrack ends up playing a huge role in bringing reggae music from Jamaica to the rest of the world. Also helping in that endeavor, of course, are Bob Marley and the Wailers, who put out classics like I Shot the Sheriff and Get Up Stand Up that year. Outlaw country becomes a thing starting around 1973 thanks to Willie Nelson's Shotgun Willie and Waylon Jennings's Honky Tonk Heroes. Hip-hop is born in the Bronx on August 11th, 1973, thanks to DJ Kool Herc. Hit singles on the charts in 1973 include Carly Simon's You're So Vain, Roberta Flack's Killing Me Softly with His Song, Dolly Parton's Jolene, The Rolling Stones' Angie, Dr. John's Right Place, Wrong Time, Gladys Knight and the Pips' Midnight Train to Georgia, Deep Purple's Smoke on the Water, Sweet's Ballroom Blitz, Live and Let Die by Paul McCartney and Wings, Curtis Mayfield's Superfly. By the way, one fun fact I learned from this book: apparently classic rock radio stations today play more tracks from the year 1973 than from any other single year. 1973 is also when David Bowie releases Aladdin Sane, which is the album inspired by the US tour that launched him and his Ziggy Stardust persona into superstardom. Bowie also produced The Stooges' ferocious third album, Raw Power, which is released in 73, and Lou Reed's Walk on the Wild Side, which peaks on the charts that same year. The New York Dolls are also pumping rock and roll full of gender-bending glam, releasing their debut album in 73. Back across the Atlantic, Queen puts its first album out, and The Rocky Horror Show makes its stage debut in London. And last but certainly not least, another historic 1973 debut coming from the great state of New Jersey, Bruce Springsteen's Greetings from Asbury Park. Of course, there was a lot going on culturally aside from just the music during that time, and Jackson's book craftily weaves the music into that larger context, connecting it to events like the end of the Vietnam War, and Roe versus Wade, and the ongoing Watergate scandal. And this passage from the book's introduction, called Raw Power and Inner Visions, is pretty great, and I think it does an excellent job of setting the scene. On February 19th, 1973, Time magazine printed a story called The Return, a new Rip Van Winkle, about prisoners of war arriving back in the U.S. following the end of the conflict in Vietnam. They found themselves profoundly shocked by the changes the country had undergone while they were captured. Women's liberation, advances in civil rights, the sexual revolution, proliferation of drugs, divorce. Plenty of people who had never left the country were stunned as well. If the Cultural Reformation of 1965 to 1972 was a bomb, 1973 was the aftermath. The debris rained down. The sun streaked through the smoke onto the road ahead. Like everyone else, the musicians tried to process what had just happened and figure out what was next. They did so through a series of albums and singles that represent the zenith of classic rock. But in rock's triumph lay the seeds of its dissolution. For 1973 was the year radio programmers figured out how to commodify so-called album-oriented rock. The format soon segregated rock from the other genres that once spurred its evolution. Under the radar, however, new forms flourished that eventually saved rock from its own stagnation, which is why Mick Jagger and Martin Scorsese set their television series Vinyl in 1973. Scorsese said, "The early 1970s and 1973 in particular was a time of great change in the music industry, and it all started in New York City. Punk, disco, hip-hop, they all began that year right here in this city. Beyond New York, country outlaws, reggae prophets, techno-pop scientists, female rockers, and defiant gender benders emerged to revitalize popular music." So if that sounds like you're seeing, Andrew Grant Jackson's 1973 Rock at the Crossroads is in our print collection. And if our copy is currently unavailable, you can also borrow one from a number of other libraries in the Buckles Consortium. Plus, you can check out most of the great music mentioned earlier, either on CD through Buckles or by streaming the albums through Hoopla Digital with your Livingston Library card. Well, that's it for now, but till next time, keep loving, keep listening, keep gazing along that open road.